city, through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him, but did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. Have you seen the one my heart loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go, till I had brought him to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. The Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Ravi Zacharias once suggested that if you want to know the heart of a people, if you want to know what's going on in a society, if you want to know what's in the heart of people, what their beliefs, what their values, and where they stand on things, and what's important to them, he said, don't look at the churches, don't look at those things, but instead look to the poets. Or as he said, the modern day would be, look to the songwriters. Look at the lyrics of the songs of what people listen to and what they enjoy that day, and that will tell you more about where people's values are and what they love, what they feel is important, and where their values lie. I thought about this week, so I thought, well, let me think. What was the number one song this past summer? And so I had to look it up, and I found out that the number one song was a song called Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke. Now, that was a song that Miley Cyrus got in trouble for dancing to in the provocative way she did. And so I want to know, well, what was this song? Now, I don't know who Robin Thicke is, but I found out that he is the son of Alan Thicke, the father from Growing Pains. So I thought, well, what was more wholesome than Growing Pains? I mean, he raised Kirk Cameron, so surely this is a good song, right? And so I went and I listened to it, and I went through the lyrics. And I want to read them to you, because I guarantee you, if you have not heard these lyrics, I guarantee your kid has. And I think your kid has heard this. And I want you to think of what this says about how we view women, how we view love, and how we view romance. Now, I'm going to bleep out some words, because this is a church service. But this is an actual verse from a song that's played on the radio. One thing I ask of you, let me be the one you back that blank to. Go from Malibu to Paris Boo. Yeah, I had a blank, but she ain't as bad as you. So hit me up when you're passing through. It goes on to describe this man pimping the woman, slapping her, and pulling the woman's hair, because, as he says, she knows she wants it. Is that how we view love now? Is that how we as a people view romance? And is that what is in our hearts of young men and women now, where they think this is how people interact? I have 3 girls. And I want them to know that that's not who they are. That no man treats them that way. No man speaks to them that way. And no man degrades them that way. I want them to know that to have respect and self-esteem for themselves, to know that this is not what is normal. Or rather, I should say, what should not be normal. But at the same time, I want them to know that love and romance and intimacy is a gift from God. I want them to know that in the context of a marriage, that is a beautiful and sacred thing. Because so often the church has been guilty, because we have seen it so blatantly bad in the culture, we have gone the exact opposite, said it's always evil. In fact, the church after the ages has been guilty of making it always evil. St. Augustine, y'all know Augustine. Augustine said this about intimacy. He said, intercourse is for procreation only. Martin Luther, the great reformer, commented that all intercourse is sin. That's what happens when young girls and boys get married. They feel like they're committing a sin when they're intimate with each other. They see it as a bad thing. Well, that's not how God intended it. God intended love and romance to be a beautiful thing, a gift that God gave to humanity to be shared between a husband and a wife. I want you to read this verse. It comes from Proverbs 5, verse 18. It says, "May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth." Okay, that sounds good, right? "A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love." I never thought we'd ever blush when reading the Bible in church, right? But it shows you that God meant this to be a beautiful thing between a husband and wife. A gift. But we have corrupted it. We have allowed a culture to take what God intended for something beautiful and pervert it to something terrible. Today we're going to look at a book of the Scripture called the Song of Songs. And maybe you probably didn't realize it was there. I mean, the Song of Songs, the title itself means it is the number one song. It is the blurred line of that generation. And it's a poem, it's a love song. And it's one of those things where we don't know what to do with it. Because first of all, there's no mention of God in the passages. And then, it describes stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable reading it. I mean, it's a passionate story about a husband and a wife. And so we try to allegorize it. It says, well, it doesn't really mean what it says. It means that it's between Jesus and the church, or God and His people. But that's a strange way of reading it. What it really is, I mean, it's a love story. It's a passionate love story. It's a very in-your-face love story between a husband and his wife that King Solomon wrote because of his love for his wife. Now, some will say, well, wait a minute. Solomon is not the best guy to write about romance, okay? Because Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. They're thinking, he's not the guy to tell about intimacy and love and romance. But many scholars believe that there are two options. Some believe that Solomon wrote this when he first got married, before he went down that pursuit of pleasure. But the other one I think is more credible, which I tend to believe and agree with, is that Solomon wrote this at the end of his life. After he had tried all the pursuits of pleasure. He says in Ecclesiastes 2:10, he says, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, I refused my heart no pleasure." But he came back and said it's all meaningless and empty. I think Solomon wrote this at the end of his life after he went down the path. He's looking back at what he once had and say, I long for that feeling, that closeness, that intimacy again. Because he realized something was missing. And I think that many people feel the same way today. In our oversexed culture where we have politicians sending graphic pictures of themselves to other people, where we have young kids taking graphic pictures of themselves sent to other teenagers. When we have all this going on, many people are saying, is this all there is? There's got to be more to it. And they're longing for the closeness, for the intimacy, for the love and romance, where it is more than just being physical, where it involves the whole person. They're longing for something more. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's hope. And I think it will bring people back to God. In her book, in a book that I strongly recommend, especially for those who have young girls in their house, a book by Paula Reinhardt called Sex and the Soul of a Woman, she writes this: "The desire for romance and the beauty of a good relationship, for deep connections with people that last through thick and thin, is like a homing device that God instills in our hearts early on. And unless we have completely been short-circuited, that is the very desire that will lead us back home in the most real sense of the word." So it's that longing for that relationship that not only bring us to other people in a more intimate way, but also bring us back to God. This morning, what I just want to do is I want to look at basically two things. I want us to look at the dangers of rushing into romance when we're not ready. And then I want us to look at the dangers of not having romance once we are married. Okay. I want to look at all this. Keeps going, boy. Okay, so the first one to look at is not to rush in romance. It says here in Song of Songs, verse 3, verse 5, "Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires." Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. In other words, don't rush into something you are not ready for, because you make a mess of things. I want you to pretend with me. Pretend that you are starving. You are hungry, okay? You're just salivate in the mouth. Your belly's going, you're grumbling. And so you throw a chicken breast on the grill. And you're so hungry, you can't wait to dive into it. But then you look at it and you're so hungry, you say, I can't wait till it's done. And so you go and you pick up that piece of pink meat with blood dripping from it, and you go, you chew down on it. Now you say, well, boy, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. That was nasty. Not only have you ruined a good meal that was intended, but now you're sick for quite a long time because you did not wait until it was ready. And would you know that the same thing happens when young people rush into romance, into intimacy before they're not ready? It impacts us in very powerful ways. What God intended to be a blessing easily becomes a burden for many folks. Now, I can easily talk about the physical ramifications that you hear all the time about, STDs and unwanted pregnancies and all that. But I want to talk about a deeper wound that happens. What happens to the soul? When I was in high school, I sat next to a young girl, and I won't say her name because she's on Facebook. But I sat next to her, and she was the beautiful, popular girl. I was the skinny little nerd that nobody, didn't have girlfriends anyway. But she was very popular, and the senior, and we were sophomores, and one of the senior football players wanted to date her. Now, I knew who this guy was. I knew the reputation he had and how he treated women. But she wanted to be so popular. Oh, she thought, I have a senior who wants to date me. I mean, wow. And so I told her, said, don't do it, don't do it. Well, she did. They began dating on Friday night. First date. Monday morning, she wasn't at school. Tuesday morning, she showed up, and when I saw her, she started crying. I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, we did it. I said, you did what? She said, we did it. And I said, you did? And she said, Friday night. He broke up with me Saturday. And she talked about how she felt used, how she felt like she was just, a toy, a piece of meat. And she said she never felt more worthless in her entire life than she did at that point. If you watch any movie, any TV show, it always looks the same. Boy meets girl, boy ends up in bed with girl, first night, and then even if things don't work out, they go their separate way, no harm, no foul, no damage. But that could be anything farther than the truth. It doesn't work like Hollywood says. An article in Psychology Today interviewed 270 sexually active college-age kids. And those 270, they asked, do you regret being sexually active? You know what percent said they did? 72% said, I wish we hadn't done it. 72%. The men, the common excuse that they said why they regret it, because they felt like they used a person. For women, they said they felt like they had been used by someone. You see, sex outside of marriage is just as destructive and soul-tearing as it is healing and redemptive in the purpose it was meant for. And what happens, it ends up awakening before its time. The desire becomes, as one person said, restless and shrouded in shame. And it attacks the whole being. Why is that? Well, it's because when you are intimate with another person, it's not just your physical bodies. There's a joining of two beings. Two people with souls and spirits. And you cannot just engage the body and think that your spirit and your soul is going to be unaffected by it. You become one with the person. You can't not engage without impacting everybody else. This is what Paul wrote. This is the Message translation. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 16. He says, there's more to sex than mere skin on skin. Sex is as much a spiritual mystery as a physical act. As written, the two become one. Since we want to become one with the Master, we must not pursue the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more lonely than ever. That kind that we can never become one. The two become one flesh. You become one. And whether you desire it or not, whether you meant to or not, there is a lasting bond that is created when you are with another person. That bond is there. Psychologists said that they've studied this, and they said that when you have an intense emotional sensation, such as your first experience, it is embedded deeply into your memory, creating what they call flashbulb memories. In other words, it said that that powerful first relationship can become a template for every other relationship you have from that point on. Because that bond is there. And it's hard to get over. Now, it's hard on men, but it's even harder on women. That same study found that women, we've always heard that women feel more. Well, it's true. They said that when they have this experience, that women, when they feel, that they release 6 times the amount of neurons inside their brain. In other words, it's hard to get over. You just don't forget it. It is there. The two become one. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for joined means to adhere. And it means that the physical intimacy, the two become one, creates this glue-like bond. I mean, there's a glue that kind of brings the two people together. And that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be, when you're in this relationship, the two come together and you never feel closer than you had before. And that's why, many couples say that, on their wedding night, they've never felt more closer to their spouse than they ever did than when they cemented that relationship by being intimate together. And so I say, if you are not ready to be joined for life in the bonds of marriage, then you are not ready for that type of intimacy. You see, it is not about a momentary physical gratification. It is about the joining of two souls. It's about when you love someone so much that you want to love and stir them and be with them for the rest of your life. It is about what has already happened between you two. And it's just an overflow of that love that you have for that person. And when you are married, that love is special. You see, when you are married, there's a level of commitment that is not there anytime else. See, when you get married, you are telling that person, I'm giving up a part of my independence and accepting responsibility for you. You do the same for me. In other words, I'm not getting out of this. We're together. And that creates that trust and that bond. Now, when it's done before that and without that level of commitment, it is devastating. Why? Well, first of all, it damages women because it degrades them and makes them think that the only value they have is in what they can provide. That video that Robin Thicke played shows women walking around in scantily dresses. Miley Cyrus was up on stage wearing nothing but a skin-colored bikini. And I want to say, that's not who you are. That's not it. There's more to you than that. You can go to Amsterdam, and there are women who are in windows waiting to be bought. That you can go and shop for women like you would shop for clothes or for groceries. Now, I am a father of 3 girls, and I don't want my girls thinking that the only value they have to a boy is in what they can give them. I want them to know that they are special and made in the image of God. And so when you look at a woman, what do you see? Do you see just a piece of flesh? Or do you see a soul? Paul tells us that when we become saved, we no longer look at the world the same way. Pope John Paul once said that the problem with pornography is not that it shows too little, but that it doesn't show enough of a woman. It doesn't show that she is a child of God, that she is made in the image of God. It doesn't show that she is someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's mother. And when a woman feels like the only thing I have to offer is my body, they feel degraded. And then also, it impacts your self-worth. You see, the culture would tell you that women, you're liberated, and men, you're liberated if you just go and have this hooking up. That's a lie. Because it impacts your self-worth. Many women tell you that I didn't feel better after I gave in. I felt worse. I felt worse about myself. I felt the guilt. I felt the shame. And it impacts girls, but it also impacts the men. It's damaging the men because, first of all, it makes the men, once that appetite is out, it's hard to get it back in. It's hard to stop. It's like, even though they know it's unfulfilling, but once you start that appetite, it just consumes you. It's kind of like drinking seawater when you're thirsty. You know it's going to make you sick, it's going to hurt you, but you keep drinking anyway. And a lot of times that's what boys do. They get addicted. You know, one picture turns into another picture. Pretty soon they're surfing the internet. Pretty soon that leads to another thing. And it gets worse and worse and worse. And it's hard to turn off the valve once it's opened. And second, all studies have shown what it also does to young men is it keeps them in a perpetual state of adolescence. In other words, they want to be boys. They want to keep doing what they want, feeling good, without accepting responsibility for their actions. Why do we have so many single mothers now? Because men think they can just do what they do and leave and have no responsibility for what they've done. Because they're always in a state of adolescence. They can be a boy. Ladies, don't let them be a boy. And also, the big thing is that it ruins what God made. A beautiful thing that God made for a husband and wife. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Anna and the King. It's an older film, and it's about this king of this foreign nation. He has all these concubines, but he has this widow school teacher come and teach his concubines. But something happens that he wasn't expecting. He falls in love with her. And he has all these women, but he falls in this one girl. But there's a scene where they're out by the ocean, they're dancing. He says something I think is so telling. He says, I did not know there was so much to be had in the love of one woman. Many of y'all remember Wilt Chamberlain's claim to have slept with 20,000 women. And everybody made a big fuss about that. But what you didn't hear on the news is what he said after that. Is that he'd rather have just slept with one. They don't tell you that. It is something sacred. So because it is so sacred and special, you need to protect yourself. Protect that experience with boundaries. You know, when you have boundaries, it means there's value there. You go to a museum, you can touch a lot of things. There's a one piece of art that has roped off and says, don't touch, because you know that's valuable. Well, guys, girls, this experience is sacred. It is valuable. So you must establish boundaries. And ladies, let me tell you, you are a priceless art. Not to be touched just by anybody. Ladies, you deserve to be courted, to be pursued, to have a guy bring you flowers, to have a guy bring you chocolates, to have a guy knock on the door, to come to your father and say, may I take so-and-so out? You deserve to be romanced in that way. Not just text message, hey, let's hook up after a while. You deserve better than that. So protect yourself. And I would say for the fathers and the guys. And we spoke last week. Part of the responsibility when you become a father and a husband is you take the pledge to protect the women in your life, to protect them and to provide for them. And that means also protect their purity. Dads, protect your daughter's purity. You know, I have 3 girls, and I love y'all boys. I think y'all are great. I don't trust you. I don't trust any boy between the ages of 10 and 18. Actually, between the ages of 10 and 30. 10 and 40. Okay. But I don't trust any girls that age either. And so you don't allow them to get in compromising positions. You protect them from themselves. And that is part of your role as a father. You protect and you make sure you build up that self-esteem of your daughters and your boys. And I would say this to the girls, that if a young man does not respect you enough to build you up, to court you, to romance you like that, to bring you flowers and all this, if he does not respect you enough to wait until he puts a ring on your finger and says, I do, then that is a young man not worth having. Don't fall into that trap. Don't ruin what God has given by awakening love before it's time. By going against those boundaries. Okay. Now, I know my time is up, but I want to just hit this real fast. As great as dire it is beforehand of awakening love before you're ready, there's also as much danger as not awakening love once you are married, by not pursuing it. We discussed how beautiful it is. In Jewish law, did you know in Jewish law it said that when a young couple got married, that a young man could not be busy or go to war for 1 year after marriage? 1 year? Do you know why? It says in the Old Testament, it says for 1 year he is free to stay at home to bring happiness to the wife he has married. It's about bringing happiness. But when you get married, three things happen that changes things. First, you get busy. Then you have kids. And then you get familiar and you take the other person for granted. That's what happened. That love of romance you had at the beginning starts to pull apart. And that adhesive begins to pull away. That impacts your marriage. And when that romance is neglected in marriage, it opens all kind of doors of temptation and trouble. Paul says here in 1 Corinthians 7:5, do not deprive each other except by mutual consent, and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, for women, the men, when you see women, a lot of times men start to deprive women of that emotional attachment. We start to ignore. We start, ignore their needs and all that. We start to take them for granted. So we don't build them up. We don't tell them how beautiful they are or show the love. But now, for women, oftentimes, the guys, they take away that physical attachment. And that hurts guys. I want to read to you what Paul Coughlin wrote in his book called No More Christian Nice Guy. He says, women, sexual intimacy tells a man that you care about him, and him only. It's how he feels special. It is where a man feels appreciated. And he also says, sex is also the sharpest, most jagged knife in our back when it's not given, or worse, given without passion, focus, and interest. Our pain is far more desperate than you realize. See, the impact of women is that the women feel unloved and undesired. For the men, it feels like, maybe I'm not a man anymore. Maybe she doesn't love me anymore. So how do we rekindle that romance? Well, first of all, get your spouse together and get your Bible and read Song of Songs together, okay? And bring a fan, because it'll get hot, okay? But second of all, there's three affirmations. First of all, affirm each other verbally. You go through Song of Songs, what's so great is when it begins, this woman inside the passage, she feels, her self-esteem is low. She's not worthy and all that. But then the husband builds her up, keeps bragging about her, telling her how beautiful she is and how wonderful. And so, guys, build up your wives. Tell her she's beautiful. Romance her. Tell her that she's the only one. Build her up. Second of all, affirm each other physically. There is the power of touch. And that means for guys, there's such a thing as a non-sexual touch. Just patting your wife on the back, brushing her hair, letting her know that you love her regardless. And ladies, that means, have that physical attraction with your wife, with your husband. And there's a passage where it says that the Song of Songs, this man and wife felt no shame when they were together. Why is that? Because he built her up to the point where she felt comfortable with him. There's a third thing. Affirm exclusively. Exclusively. Guys, don't even look at another woman. Don't even gaze. Because what you do when you do that, you say, well, it's just looking, I'm not touching. But what you're telling your wife is that you're no longer sufficient. You're no longer good enough. Have eyes for your spouse and your spouse alone. Now, why is this also important? Because it's part of a larger story. It's not just about that relationship. Remember, of all the things that God could use to explain the relationship between Him and His people, He used the illustration of marriage. Of the two becoming one flesh. Paul says, but I'm not talking about husband and wife. I'm talking about Jesus and His church. About us. See, God desires to be married to us. He wants that kind of bond with us. As a reminder that we are more than just a body. I wish I could grab Miley Cyrus, sit her down, and say, young girl, God loves you. And you're beautiful. You don't have to do this. I like to take Robin Thicke, smack him across the head and say, you don't treat women that way. But the last thing is, what if we have made mistakes in this area? What if we have messed up in this area? Does it mean it's over? Does it mean there's no hope? Do y'all remember the story that Jesus told in John chapter 8? Woman caught in the very act of adultery. These men brought this woman, pulled her by her hair, dragged her on the streets and threw her before Jesus and said, Jesus, we call this woman the very act. In the very act, we caught her, and the law of Moses says we must stone a woman such as this, but what do you say? Do you know what Jesus did? wrote down on the ground, stood up, looked at the other guys, and said, "He who is without sin, cast the first stone." And one by one, all those men left. And I wish the Bible would tell us what was in that woman's heart, what the facial expression she had when Jesus lifted her up. And Jesus says, "Woman, where are your accusers?" She looks around and says, "They're gone." But what must have been like for her when Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Now go leave your life of sin." It's a chance to start over. And for y'all who have messed up, you're not alone. Everybody has. But in Jesus Christ, all things are made new. The old is gone, the new has come. And as far as the east is from the west, so far as He removed our transgressions from us. So no matter where you've messed up in life, whether it's in this area or any other area, there is a fountain filled with blood that flows from Emmanuel veins. And sinners are cleansed beneath that blood. Let us stand. Dear Heavenly and Gracious Father, I pray for those right now who in their heart, this is an issue they struggle with. Maybe it's because they've already gone down that path and opened that door and they feel the shame and regret that it came with it. But Lord, I pray right now that